I'm going to share a few interesting emails that came in last night while I slept. The first one's from Diana. Diana writes, "First, you have my permission to use my story. Second, please don't use my full name. Just call me Diana. It was October 2017. My boyfriend of 5 years at that time, my dog, and I decided to go camping at a campground out in a very rural part of Georgia. We had been here several times to swim in the river, but never camped there until that night. The park ranger told us this was the beginning of the off season and we would be the only campers that night. I thought that was great. It would be peaceful. It was about 10 p.m., so we decided to put the campfire out and hop in the tent to go to bed. We started hearing strange sounds outside, twigs breaking, leaves gently shuffling, and this strange cracking noise, almost as if rocks were being banged together. My dog started shaking each time this happened, and it wasn't cold, but he wouldn't bark at all. That was unusual for him. The noises kept getting closer, and it bothered us so much that we jumped in my car, about 20 feet from the tent. We thought it could be an animal, and we would be safe in the car for the night. We planned to pack and leave the next morning. Our last memory that night was getting in the car, shutting the doors, and locking them. After that, nothing. We woke up later than usual the next day to my car door being open. I found my phone laying against the rear tire, smashed. My car was in the exact same place. Our tent and things untouched. I had fresh bruises across my knees and thighs in perfect lines and random scratches/bruises on my arms. My boyfriend was untouched. Well, my SD card for my phone survived, so I used my laptop to access it because I used it to directly save everything on my phone. There, I found odd pictures of us sleeping, my door open, the dog awake sitting in the back seat. Right outside of the dome light of the car stood a tall figure. Enough to see it was there, but not enough to identify it. Another thing, we had a 30-second clip of my boyfriend facing a weird-looking wall, looking disoriented. He remembered nothing. Curious and desperate for answers, I checked my Google GPS history, and it showed me going 20 miles away from the campsite in a straight line, not on roads. It lost signal for hours, and I was magically back at camp 5 hours later. It didn't show how I returned. I checked his did the exact same thing, but he went 15 miles in the opposite direction. We only had one car at the time, and nobody knew we were there but the ranger. We lost a total of roughly 10 hours that night/next day. Nothing makes sense to me, and I just want to know what happened to us. My boyfriend also has no memory of it all. Another thing happened. Back in 2022 in Lakeland, Florida, I saw a black triangular craft that was the length of a bus from the front tip to the center of the rear of it, if that makes sense. It had red lights on the tips and was hovering completely silent. No wind, nothing. For about 10 minutes that I witnessed. It was about 30 feet above the cow pasture that was across from my mother's home. I turned my back to grab my phone for just a split second and it was gone. That fast. Ever since, I've been intrigued with ETs and UAP activity, but don't want to be seen as crazy. I have found my people. Thanks for what you do. I believe all of the stories that you're telling of other people's experiences. Tell them that they are definitely not alone. Diana. Diana, thank you for your story. You do give confirmation to the other folks who have been flooding this channel with similar stories that none of us are alone who have had these experiences. If you have a similar experience and you'd like it to be shared, you can email that experience to me here at the channel. The email is crazylake@mail.com. And if you would like to be kept anonymous, let me know and I won't use your name. Doughboy6987 writes, "Thanks for posting this. I've been waiting for someone outside of the metro areas to come forward. I live in Canada and I've had my own encounter with orbs. There were 4 of us in the mountains, walking down a riverbank at dusk. We were on a long weekend camping trip and we were all familiar with the area. Suddenly, from behind us, 4 orbs of different sizes and color whooshed past us and continued along the river. All of us fell to the ground, and we got dirt on our right sides from shoulder to feet. However, 2 of the people who were there, another couple, were in denial of what had just happened. I asked them why we all fell at the same time in the same direction, and a bunch of other very basic questions. Yet they were both acting like me and my girlfriend were hallucinating. Anyway, that's the very short version of a longer story. I'll try to find some time and type it all into an email and send it to you someday. I just found your channel. You guys are living the life, that's for sure. Doughboy6987, we would love to hear the rest of your story. Send it to the same email address you sent this one, crazylake@mail.com. Got one more for you. It's a little longer, so bear with me, but it's definitely worth a listen. And it's interesting in its dynamics, in specifically many of the similarities that we heard from the first story from Diana. I received this email from Steve. Steve writes, "Dear Kevin, thank you for all that you are doing to keep people informed, since our elected officials are doing nothing other than denying any knowledge of what is going on in plain sight around all of us, and not just those of us here in the U.S. I live just southeast of you in Tennessee, but around the world, as you clearly know yourself, with all the messages and comments flooding your channel from folks in other countries. I'll keep my story short and sweet. The main points being, I know you're not crazy, because I, an educated professional, though I'll not state what profession, because after telling of this experience, I would certainly be laughed out of business, have had a very similar experience. My wife and I were camping at a state park here in Tennessee during this past particularly warm November. I'll not say which state park because it's very close to where we live, and frankly, I'm convinced none of them are safe anyway. Campers, hikers, hunters, and nature lovers, beware. Should you enter the woods anywhere on earth with all that's going on at this time? My advice, which I believe you'll agree to take after hearing of my experience, is simple. Stay out of the woods. Neither my wife nor I fish or hunt. We love hiking, and the main reason we decided to go camping this past November is because we've been dealing with empty nest syndrome. Our only child, our daughter, went off to college this fall. The first time she's ever been away from us for so long, and even though she'd soon be in for the Thanksgiving break, my wife and I were both having a very hard time waiting. In a word, we both miss our baby girl so much it hurts. Anyway, we decided we'd camp out for 2 nights. Kill the whole weekend doing it because our baby girl was coming home in the middle of the upcoming week, Thanksgiving week. We hiked, carrying the minimal gear and food necessary, to a familiar location where we'd camped many times, this being the first time without our daughter. We quickly set up camp, built a fire, started snacking on the food we'd taken, and immediately started reminiscing about all the times we'd been out there with our daughter. Before we knew it, there was less than half an hour of daylight left. We were feeling sleepy, and we were both in agreement that this was the best way we could have spent our time waiting for our daughter to come home. We were about to crawl into our tent with literally just a few minutes of daylight remaining when I heard my wife say, barely audible, "What in the name of God is that?" It wasn't a question she was asking of me. It was a question she was asking herself. I followed the direction of her gaze, and I saw coming toward us a strange mist, an unexplainable thick fog. Kevin, we were camping about halfway up the side of a mountain. There were no streams close enough to us where mist or fog could have formed naturally above the water's surface, and we weren't high enough in elevation to experience the same as a result of air temperature difference. There is no way to rationally, logically, or scientifically explain what we were witnessing. This fog reached our campsite in a matter of about 2 minutes after my wife and I noticed it. As it did, my wife turned to me and said, "Do you smell?" And that's all I remember. Until the next day. My wife and I woke up in our vehicle. a 2023 Subaru Outback. We were fully dressed. We were not in any pain, nor were we visibly injured in any way, nor were our clothes dirty, ripped, or in any way disheveled. But we were both soaking wet. We got out of the car and looked around. This is how we know all of our gear was neatly packed. We opened the back hatch and there it was, as neatly packed as if we'd done it ourselves. We were fortunate that it was so unseasonably warm, otherwise we might have succumbed to hypothermia. I looked over at my wife, and as if she'd read my mind, hearing the question I didn't ask, she simply said, "Let's get the F out of here." We got in the car and began driving home. I drove, and for the record, I did not race away. I did the speed limit, or just under it, the whole way home, which was about a 40-minute drive. The odd thing is, I had a feeling of peace about all of it. I was confused, yes, as was my wife, but neither of us were scared. Since this experience, my wife and I have not felt sick. We have not told our daughter or anyone else about this experience. That's why I'm so grateful to have found your channel, so I can share this story, and this is the first time I've shared it. We do obviously have the sensation of a loss of time because basically we have no memory of anything that happened to us from about 5 p.m. on Friday evening until around 7 a.m. the following morning, Saturday. And we can't even begin to understand why we were both soaking wet. We do believe we were covered with water, as there was no odor, and it simply didn't have that salty, sticky feeling of sweat. Since there are so many holes in this story, simply because my wife and I are unaware of what happened to us, I do apologize in advance if it's of little or no use to you or your viewers. However, I do believe that sharing our story is beneficial for two reasons. Firstly, I am finally getting it off my chest, and secondly, all those people who have had similar experiences can now see that they are not alone. Kevin, thank you for all that you are doing to keep the world informed that something is going on. And I look forward to your next video. Steve in Tennessee. Steve, Diana, and Doughboy, thank you so much for your stories. Folks, if you want to share your story, you can email it to the channel, crazylake@mail.com. And again, if you don't want your name out there for the world to see so they could potentially ridicule you, I can keep you anonymous upon your request. FYI, hundreds of stories that have flooded this channel just in the last couple of weeks are now available in print and Kindle from Amazon, with True Hauntings Volume 6, real stories of people's personal experiences with the paranormal, supernatural, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and abductions. The link is in the description box below. Thank you all for your time. Keep your stories coming. I have all intentions of continuing, coming out here and bringing them to you. See you for more next time. I think I'll go this way.